The world was collapsing, kingdoms burned, faith faded, and chaos ruled the land. But from the ashes rose one man, Alfred. He didn't conquer with armies. He conquered with ideas. The fortress to protect his people, the book to enlighten their minds, the blade to defend their future. 3 pillars, 1 vision, and from that vision a nation was born. When the world around him began to crumble and kingdoms fell like sandcastles before the storm, Alfred saw what others could not. The flames that consumed his land were not the end, they were the beginning. For within the ashes of destruction lay the opportunity to rebuild, to recreate, and to redefine what it meant to be a nation. While others were driven by fear, Alfred was driven by vision. He understood that a civilization does not survive on might alone. It survives on the strength of its foundations. And so he began the quiet revolution that would change the course of history, a revolution not fought in grand speeches or fleeting victories, but in structure, wisdom, and courage. The first pillar rose from the earth itself, the Burh. To the untrained eye, it was only a fortress, a collection of walls and watchtowers meant to defend against invaders. But Alfred knew it was more than that. The Burh was a symbol of unity. Every stone that was placed, every trench that was dug, represented the will of a people refusing to be broken. It was not merely about defense, it was about belonging. Within those walls, farmers, craftsmen, and soldiers stood side by side, bound not by blood but by purpose. The Burh turned scattered villages into a living network of protection, order, and cooperation. It was the beating heart of a new England, one that understood that true strength is built from within. And Alfred's genius was not just in building walls, but in building systems. He mapped the land, connected every stronghold, and ensured that no community stood alone. What he created was not just a line of defense, it was the physical manifestation of resilience, the first proof that a nation could stand tall through strategy rather than sheer force. But Alfred knew that walls could not hold forever. Fortresses crumble, armies fall, and empires fade when their minds go dark. So he turned to the second pillar, the book. In a world ruled by ignorance, he made education his weapon. He believed that no kingdom could survive if its people did not think, if its leaders did not learn, if its faith was not rooted in understanding. Alfred saw knowledge not as luxury, but as necessity. He studied, translated, and taught so that every man might know the laws that governed him and the principles that sustained his soul. He brought back the lost art of learning, building schools, and spreading the written word across a land that had forgotten its own language of wisdom. Where others saw power in conquest, he saw power in enlightenment. He translated sacred texts, rewrote laws in the tongue of the people, and declared that true leadership begins with education. The book was not merely a tool, it was the mind of the revolution. Through it, Alfred taught that no fortress is stronger than an educated mind, and no blade sharper than the thought that guides it. And then came the third pillar, the blade. The sword of Alfred was not born of hatred, but of necessity. He did not seek war, but when it came, he faced it with resolve. To him, the blade represented discipline, not destruction. It was the reminder that peace is not given, it is earned. Every warrior under his command was taught that strength without wisdom is chaos, and courage without purpose is blindness. The blade was not for glory, but for guardianship. It defended the Burh, protected the book, and ensured that the light of knowledge and unity would not be extinguished by the darkness of tyranny. Alfred's armies were not the largest, but they were guided by clarity, by the knowledge that they fought not for gold or conquest, but for the survival of an idea. The blade was the enforcer of that idea, the final shield that preserved what the mind and the wall had built. Together, these 3 pillars formed more than a strategy. They formed a philosophy. The Burh gave structure, the book gave meaning, and the blade gave protection. Alfred's genius lay in understanding that none could stand alone. A wall without knowledge is only a cage. Knowledge without defense is only a dream, and strength without unity is only violence. He blended all three into one living force, each sustaining the other, each rising when the other was tested. In his revolution, the fortress became a classroom, the sword became a symbol of justice, and the book became a weapon against decay. His England was not simply rebuilt, it was reborn in thought, in purpose, and in spirit. Alfred's revolution was not one of sudden glory, but of patient transformation. He saw the connection between body, mind, and soul, and built a nation that honored all three. The Burh represented the body, the physical resilience of a people who refused to surrender. The book represented the mind, the intellectual awakening that made them more than survivors, but thinkers and builders of a better world. The blade represented the spirit, the courage to defend what is right, even in the face of certain defeat. And through this trinity of power, Alfred forged not only a kingdom, but a model of civilization itself. He showed that progress comes not through domination, but through integration, not through conquest, but through creation. The true brilliance of Alfred's vision was that it transcended his own time. The walls he built were not just boundaries of defense, they were blueprints for cooperation. The books he spread were not mere records of law, they were seeds of wisdom. The blades he wielded were not tools of war, they were guardians of peace. He proved that the might of a nation is not measured by the number of its soldiers, but by the strength of its citizens' character. Every fortress he built protected not just lives, but values. Every word he wrote preserved not just knowledge, but identity. Every battle he fought secured not just land, but legacy. What Alfred accomplished was more than survival. It was evolution. He taught his people to see beyond the moment, beyond fear, beyond the sword's edge. He understood that a kingdom could fall and rise again, but an enlightened mind once awakened could never be enslaved. His revolution was not about overthrowing rulers or rewriting maps. It was about redefining what it means to rule. Through his pillars, he created a balance of power where intellect guided might and faith guided intellect. His was the kind of leadership that saw far beyond his own crown, a vision that planted roots for centuries to come. And though his enemies came with fire and fury, Alfred's legacy endured, not because of how many battles he won, but because of what he built between them. The Burh still echoes in every community that values protection and unity. The book still breathes in every classroom, every idea that challenges ignorance, and the blade still gleams in every act of courage that defends truth. His revolution did not end with his death. It became the foundation upon which the modern world would stand. Through the fortress, the book, and the blade, Alfred did not just save his people, he awakened the very spirit of civilization itself. They called him the last hope of a dying kingdom, a lone mind standing between order and oblivion. When England was torn apart by Viking steel and chaos, Alfred refused to bow. He looked upon the ashes of his homeland not with despair, but with design. To him, the fall of his kingdom was not a defeat, but a lesson. He saw that power without wisdom collapses, faith without structure fades, and courage without discipline destroys itself. From this understanding, he forged a revolution unlike any other. It was not waged with endless armies or empty pride, but with vision, patience, and three eternal forces that would become his instruments of rebirth: the fortress, the book, and the blade. The first step in Alfred's transformation was to restore balance to a shattered land. The Viking onslaught had not only broken armies, it had broken trust. People had lost faith in safety, in leadership, in one another. Alfred realized that before he could teach or inspire, he had to protect. So he began to weave a network of strongholds across his realm: the Burhs, These were not mere walls of stone, they were symbols of security. Each burh was carefully planned, connected to others by distance and road, ensuring that no settlement stood alone. Within these fortresses, villagers found refuge, warriors found purpose, and leaders found structure. Alfred understood that the foundation of civilization is protection, not through fear, but through unity. The Burh became the physical proof that England could organize, defend, and survive. It turned chaos into community. In those days of endless raids and sudden terror, the Burh stood as a declaration. England would not scatter again, but Alfred was not content with defense alone. He knew that walls without wisdom would only delay destruction. The true survival of a people depended not on how well they fought, but on how deeply they thought. And so, he turned to the second pillar of his revolution, the book. Knowledge to Alfred was more powerful than any army. He saw how ignorance had weakened his people, how centuries of complacency had dulled their spirit. The loss of learning was as deadly as the loss of territory. He set out to reclaim it. Alfred gathered scholars, revived forgotten texts, and began to translate sacred and philosophical works into the common tongue so that every man might read, learn, and think for himself. He brought light back to the dark corners of the kingdom, reminding his people that wisdom is the only defense that never crumbles. The book was not just ink and parchment. It was the rebirth of reason. Still, Alfred understood that thought alone could not protect what it awakened. There would always be forces that sought to destroy the light, forces of greed, violence, and domination. And so, he raised the third pillar, the blade. But unlike the warlords of his age, Alfred did not worship the sword. He respected it. To him, the blade was not an instrument of conquest, but of duty. He trained his armies not to kill for glory, but to defend what was sacred, their homes, their knowledge, their freedom. The blade symbolized responsibility, not rage. It was the edge of justice, the final argument of order. Every warrior who carried a blade in Alfred's service carried more than steel. He carried the weight of the kingdom's ideals. They were taught discipline, strategy, and restraint. They learned that the sword should follow the mind, not lead it. Through the blade, Alfred restored pride and courage to a people who had forgotten how to fight for something greater than themselves. His battles were not just won on fields, they were won in hearts. The soldiers who fought for Alfred were not bound by fear of their enemy, but by love for what they defended. In that unity of purpose lay his greatest strength. The brilliance of Alfred's revolution was that these three forces, the burh, the book, and the blade, were not separate. They were interdependent. Each one gave life to the others. The fortress protected the school enlightened the soldier, and the soldier defended both. It was a living triangle of order, body, mind, and spirit working as one. Alfred had discovered the secret of lasting power. It is not domination, but balance. The burh was his body, the book his intellect, and the blade his will. Together, they created a kingdom that could endure the storms of time, because it was rooted not in oppression, but in harmony. While others fought merely to survive, Alfred fought to evolve. His vision reached beyond the battlefield, beyond his own lifetime. He saw that the true strength of a people lies in their ability to think collectively and act with purpose. The fortresses he built became towns. The schools he opened became the seeds of culture, and the army he trained became the guardian of civilization. The ripples of his revolution spread far beyond the borders of his reign, shaping the very soul of England for generations to come. What made Alfred extraordinary was not that he built walls or won wars. It was that he built meaning into everything he touched. Each burh stood for more than stone. It stood for faith in one another. Each book carried more than words. It carried the power of transformation. Each blade held more than sharpness. It held the weight of justice. He turned survival into structure, resistance into rebirth. His was not a revolution of blood, but of blueprint. a careful reconstruction of how humanity should live, learn, and defend what is right. Alfred understood that the fate of nations is decided not by chance, but by design. Every empire that forgets the book soon loses the blade, and every kingdom that neglects its fortresses invites its fall. His wisdom lay in balance. He never allowed strength to replace knowledge, nor knowledge to replace action. He saw that progress demands both pen and sword, both thought and defense. Through that insight, he created not just a powerful nation, but a lasting philosophy. The Burh gave protection, the book gave purpose, and the blade gave preservation. Together, they formed the rhythm of Alfred's England, a civilization built not for an age, but for all ages. In every age that followed, whenever darkness threatened to return, the echo of his three pillars could still be felt. Wherever people built communities of trust, the spirit of the Burh lived on. Wherever minds sought truth, the book whispered its wisdom. Wherever courage rose to defend what was right, the blade shone once again. Alfred had proven that no power on earth can destroy a people who build with both heart and mind. His revolution was not just for his kingdom, it was for humanity itself. A reminder that greatness begins not in the conquest of others, but in the mastery of self. He understood that no kingdom could stand upon force alone. The sword may win battles, but it cannot sustain peace. The fortress may guard a people, but it cannot guide their hearts. The book may teach wisdom, but it cannot defend it. Alfred saw that the survival of a nation required harmony between all three. It was not enough to rule, it was necessary to enlighten. It was not enough to protect, it was necessary to prepare. In a world torn between ignorance and invasion, he became the bridge that united strength with intellect, action with thought, and faith with reason. He knew that the true revolution is not the one that conquers others, but the one that transforms the self. When Alfred took the crown, the kingdom was fractured, its hope dimmed by endless raids and internal strife. But he did not see despair, he saw design. Each broken piece was an opportunity to rebuild, not as it was, but as it should have been. He began to craft his vision, not with arrogance, but with understanding. He observed that the enemy could destroy cities, but could not destroy purpose. He studied the failures of kings before him and found their weakness not in the sword, but in the spirit. Their mistake was believing that fear could rule where faith was absent, that control could replace character. Alfred sought to change that forever. He started where every lasting transformation begins, with the mind. The book became his tool of awakening. Knowledge, he believed, is the only defense that cannot be captured or burned. He gathered scholars and thinkers, translated the wisdom of ages into the language of his people, and gave birth to a nation that could not only fight, but think. He made learning a duty, not a privilege. He taught that ignorance is the silent enemy of every age, and that a man who cannot think for himself will always fight someone else's war. Under his guidance, education became an act of rebellion against darkness. He transformed the written word into a weapon of light, spreading understanding where confusion had ruled. For Alfred, the book was not paper, it was power. As knowledge spread, so too did courage. For he knew that wisdom without the will to defend it was only a fragile dream. The blade was the manifestation of that will. It was not a tool of destruction, but a covenant of protection. Alfred trained his warriors not to crave battle, but to honor it. He forged in them a discipline born of purpose, not pride. Every strike of the blade was to preserve, not to conquer. He redefined warfare itself, turning it from chaos into calculated defense. He understood that victory is not achieved by killing more, but by losing less. Less humanity, less wisdom, less direction. His soldiers carried not just weapons, but ideals. They fought not for plunder or vengeance, but for preservation of culture, knowledge, and law. Through the blade, Alfred taught that courage is not the absence of fear, but the mastery of it. Yet even with learning and valor, a nation without structure is a ship without anchor. So Alfred raised the third pillar, the Burh. These fortresses, meticulously designed, were more than stone walls. They were the embodiment of organization. Each Burh was a heartbeat in the larger body of the kingdom, connected through roads, communication, and cooperation. They created unity where once there had been isolation. Within their walls, safety gave birth to stability, and stability to progress. The Burh was where people rebuilt their confidence in one another. It was not just the defense of land, it was the defense of life, the defense of community. It gave shape to Alfred's vision of a nation where every individual contributed to the strength of the whole. Together, the Burh, the book, and the blade formed a triangle of unbreakable balance. Each relied on the other, and none could stand alone. Without the book, the blade becomes blind. Without the blade, the book becomes vulnerable. Without the Burh, both lose their foundation. Alfred's genius was not simply in creating them, but in weaving them into a living system, each one feeding the other, each one sustaining the idea of a civilization that could think, defend, and endure. He turned strategy into philosophy, and philosophy into survival. Alfred's reign was not defined by his victories in battle, but by his mastery of order. He looked beyond the temporary triumphs of war and sought the eternal triumph of wisdom. He knew that the glory of kings fades, but the progress of people endures. Every Burh he built taught the power of collaboration. Every book he preserved reminded the people of their shared heritage. Every blade he forged was a declaration that freedom must be guarded with both might and morality. His revolution was not for one generation. It was for every generation that would inherit the fruits of his foresight. He understood that civilization itself is fragile, that it exists only when strength is guided by knowledge and restrained by ethics. A nation can rebuild its walls and still fall if it forgets what those walls protect. The enemy outside the gate is never as dangerous as the ignorance within it. Alfred's brilliance lay in understanding this truth. He taught that enlightenment is the truest form of defense, that leadership is not domination, but education, and that every citizen shares the responsibility of keeping the light alive. He believed in the dignity of labor, the sanctity of thought, and the necessity of courage. His rule was not one of tyranny, but of teaching. He elevated the act of learning to the level of worship, and the act of defense to the level of duty. His kingdom became a living classroom, where every soldier was also a student, and every scholar was also a guardian. He united intellect and action, creating a society where wisdom was not distant. When the winds of chaos tore across his kingdom, and the age of reason seemed to vanish beneath the smoke of war, Alfred did not crumble beneath the weight of despair. He looked upon the ruins and saw the outline of a new beginning. He understood that true leadership does not emerge when the world is calm, but when it stands on the edge of collapse. It is in the silence after defeat that the greatest minds begin to build. Alfred knew that the future would not be inherited. It would have to be constructed. So he began to lay its foundation upon three timeless forces: the Burh, the book, and the blade. These were not mere tools of survival. They were symbols of transformation. They represented the body, mind, and spirit of a nation rising from the ashes of its own destruction. The Burh was the first stone in Alfred's vision. He saw that a people who cannot protect themselves can never prosper. But protection to Alfred meant more than walls. It meant structure. The Burh was a living system, a network of fortresses designed with precision, not as isolated towers of fear, but as interconnected hubs of unity. Each one stood as a beacon of order against the chaos that threatened to consume the land. Within its walls, soldiers trained, craftsmen worked, and families found shelter. The Burh transformed fear into stability. It gave people something they had long forgotten: trust. Trust in their king, trust in one another, and trust in the idea that the future could still be built. Alfred knew that once a people regain their sense of safety, they regain their strength to dream. But Alfred was no ordinary king. He understood that a wall alone cannot preserve a civilization. The enemy outside might be held at bay, But the enemy within, ignorance, complacency, and decay, was far more dangerous. So he turned to the second pillar, the book. To rebuild a nation, he would first rebuild its mind. Knowledge, he believed, was the shield of the soul. He watched as the wisdom of ages was forgotten, as the art of reading and writing faded from his people, and he swore to restore it. The book was his instrument of awakening. He gathered scholars from distant lands, revived the lost learning of his ancestors, and began translating the great works of history, law, and faith into the language of his people. To Alfred, education was not a privilege, it was survival. He believed that an ignorant people are easy to rule, but impossible to uplift. He refused to lead a blind nation. He wanted thinkers, not followers. Through the book, he gave his people the power to question, to reason, and to imagine. He understood that knowledge was the only weapon that could not be stolen, burned, or broken. The book was his act of rebellion against decay, his declaration that the mind is mightier than the sword. It became the foundation of his moral order, shaping not just the intellect of his people, but the conscience of his kingdom. Yet Alfred knew that wisdom alone was not enough. The world beyond the walls was still fierce and unrelenting, and those who value peace must be prepared to defend it. Thus came the third pillar, the blade. But Alfred's blade was not the weapon of tyranny, it was the instrument of justice. It was not drawn to conquer, but to protect what was sacred. He trained his warriors not merely in the art of war, but in the discipline of purpose. To him, courage meant more than charging into battle. It meant standing firm for what was right. His armies did not march for power, they marched for preservation. He taught his soldiers that the sword should always serve the mind, never rule it. In Alfred's hands, the blade became the guardian of the book and the protector of the Burh. It was the silent promise that wisdom and structure would never be destroyed by force. He understood that peace without defense is fragile, and defense without morality is dangerous. The balance of the three was his greatest insight. The Burh provided safety, the book provided guidance, and the blade ensured endurance. Together, they became the trinity of his revolution, the living architecture of his philosophy. Each one existed not for itself, but for the preservation of the others. The Burh without the book would be lifeless stone. The book without the blade would be helpless words. The blade without both would be chaos. Through this trinity, Alfred transformed his kingdom from a battlefield into a blueprint. He wove these elements together not as temporary measures, but as eternal principles. The Burh gave people a sense of belonging. The book gave them the ability to think, and the blade gave them the courage to act. He taught that progress requires all three, that structure without knowledge breeds stagnation, knowledge without courage breeds weakness, and courage without structure breeds destruction. The balance of the three created something rare: stability with vision, strength with wisdom, order with freedom. Alfred's revolution was quiet but profound. He did not seek glory and conquest, but legacy and construction. His victories were not just over enemies, but over ignorance, despair, and disorder. Each fortress he built became a sanctuary of hope. Each book he spread became a spark of enlightenment. Each blade he forged became a symbol of discipline. He redefined what it meant to rule, not as one who commands obedience, but as one who cultivates understanding. His kingdom was not merely defended, it was educated, organized, and inspired. He saw leadership not as a throne, but as a duty to awaken others. He believed that no man truly rules until he teaches his people to rule themselves. The Burh gave them the means to organize, the book gave them the wisdom to lead, and the blade gave them the will to stand. Under his vision, the common man became a participant in the shaping of destiny. Alfred taught that greatness is not a gift of birth, but a discipline of the mind. His people learned to see beyond fear, to think beyond survival, and to fight for ideals greater than their own lives. His revolution endured because it was not built upon conquest, but upon consciousness. It did not depend on one man's power, but on the awakening of many. The burhs became cities, the books became legacies, and the blades became traditions of honor. His philosophy transcended his own era, echoing through the centuries in every civilization that sought to unite strength with wisdom. He proved that the true foundation of any society lies not in wealth or armies, but in the harmony of structure, knowledge, and courage. Even after his death, the pillars of his revolution stood tall. The fortresses he built became symbols of endurance. The books he translated became the seeds of English thought. The code of honor he forged among his warriors became the moral thread that bound future generations. He left behind not just walls or words, but a way of thinking, a living reminder that civilization is not a state, but a choice renewed every day. Every time a nation chooses reason over violence, education over ignorance, and unity over division, it walks the path Alfred carved. He taught through example that true power is not measured in what a king controls, but in what he creates. His legacy was not a crown, but a consciousness, a vision that outlived the fires of war and the passing of centuries. Through the Burh, he gave structure to the body of his people. Through the book, he gave clarity to their minds. Through the blade, he gave courage to their hearts. And through all three, he proved that even in an age of darkness, the light of human will can still build a world worth defending. Alfred's revolution was not merely the rebuilding of a fallen kingdom, it was the rebirth of civilization itself. He showed that a nation's true power is never found in its armies or its riches, but in the balance between protection, wisdom, and courage. The Burh, the book, and the blade were not just the pillars of his age. They are the eternal laws of progress. Where the Burh stands, chaos cannot rule. Where the book speaks, ignorance cannot thrive. Where the blade defends, injustice cannot endure. He proved that even in the darkest hours of history, greatness is not born from conquest, but from conscience, not from domination, but from discipline. His legacy whispers to every generation that follows. Build your walls with purpose, sharpen your mind with truth, and wield your strength with honor. For when these three stand united, the structure of the Burh, the wisdom of the book, and the courage of the blade, no empire can fall. No vision can die, and no age of darkness can last forever.